For me, it was the moment I laid eyes on her on a TV show. I'd never seen her before. Robert Redford personified modern Hollywood's gentlemanly ideal for decades. As everyone else burst into flames or faded away, Redford remained steady, golden, and above the chaos. He avoided the spotlight. He made no money off of rumors. Until today, he had never publicly discussed his shortcomings. The 88-year-old Oscar winner finally spoke out about something his closest friends and family have known for a long time. Actors who made his job miserable, men he argued with behind closed doors, and legendary figures he detested were all part of the problem. The encounters were quite different from the classic performances. You heard it here first. Here are some names, and some will cause you emotional distress.
On the stress.
You might never view one of Hollywood's most cherished masterpieces in the same way again by the time you reach the last name on Redford's list. Though they worked together on Downhill Racer and a few other projects, Redford and Hackman were never friends and had no interest in becoming such. The calm, collected approach of Redford frequently clashed with Hackman's explosive fury. Hackman was notorious for losing it during rehearsals, refusing to follow directions, and opting for raw aggression instead of nuance. Exhaustion set in for Redford. In one interview, Redford acknowledged to a coworker that he is indeed a legend. Ew dang. However, he was indifferent to the people he bullied into submission. In the 1970s, there was mutual respect, but now there is a lot of guarded distancing. It was Hackman's work ethic that Redford respected. The tactics were intolerable to him, but no one could accuse him of being lazy. Jarrett. Hackman treated every part as if it were a battlefield. He was more than an actor. He was a master. Actors' co-stars frequently become unintentional targets when directors were entangled in conflicts. And Redford was disturbed by Hackman's erratic behavior since he valued teamwork and subdued discipline more. According to one assistant director, the Hackman characters in Downhill Racer were completely random, intelligent, or aggressive. There were intermittent flare-ups during the production, but a defining moment finally broke them. Hackman allegedly became enraged about an unfavorable lighting arrangement during a pivotal passage that required nuanced emotion. He remained in his trailer for almost an hour, causing work to be delayed. No amount of intervention from the director helped. Gene, this isn't your effing movie, Redford warned Hackman as he personally approached his trailer, unlocked the door, and delivered the statement to the team. Everyone pitches in, be present or else, Hackman became seen. Unfortunately, they avoided any further off-camera conversation at all costs. Redford would call Hackman a sledgehammer in a violin store when they were alone. It has nothing to do with ability. Quality. At no point did Redford downplay Hackman's brilliance. It centered on basic respect, temperament, and control. Rumor has it that Redford, who had been secretly producing and directing since the late 1970s, denied Hackman's inclusion on multiple casting lists, where, as the great actor would put it in the margins, it wasn't worth it. Inconceivable person. They kept working in tandem throughout the years. Despite being both Oscar winners and symbols of the golden age of Hollywood, they were never seen on screen together again. Asking Redford, do you regret not working with Hackman more? After all these years, he hesitated and smiled diplomatically. According to him, there are some combinations that can happen once. He ended it there. In one interview, Redford acknowledged to a coworker that he is indeed a legend. Although he was indifferent to the people he bullied in order to get his aim. Jim Woods. Their personal and political ideologies were poles apart. Although they never worked together on a full-length film, on multiple occasions, she tried out for supporting roles in films directed by Redford, but was always turned down. Redford came clean about how unnerving and challenging it was to be in the same room as Woods later on. According to rumors, Redford walked out of a casting session after Woods questioned his Vietnam policy during a courtroom drama read. Disrupted areas that necessitated tranquility, as Redford clarified thereafter. Managing that energy wasn't something I was interested in. Although politics had a role, it wasn't the only factor. Redford, who is calm, principled, and reserved, found Woods' aggressive manner draining. Woods took great delight in his status as the room's foremost intellectual, but Redford had none of it. During their first encounter, Redford allegedly stated that he had never wanted to comprehend the story. He aspired to be its master. When it came to creativity, the two men couldn't have been more different. Delicate character complexity and emotional layering were Redford's strong suits. In comparison, Woods pounded into rooms with explosive power. Very sharp, very wired, very unpredictable. According to one casting director, if you could just make it through the storm, he would bestow brilliance upon you. That was a risk Redford was not ready to make. The confrontation entered the annals of casting directors' mythology, in the late 1980s, while Redford was in the midst of producing a legal thriller, there was a particularly heated exchange. Even though he was only in a supporting part, Woods burst onto the scene with pinpoint accuracy. Just to abandon the plot to discuss the political implications of a line halfway through. Suddenly, the role-playing session transformed into an academic discussion of Cold War foreign policy. Redford shut the script and bolted out of the room after barely 2 minutes of listening. I should return to college, he told me afterwards, if I wanted a debate. Years later, in interviews and on panels for the private sector, Woods was still picking on Redford. Without ever mentioning him by name, Woods would sometimes make a passing allusion to the hypocrites in Hollywood, who talk a good game about peace but operate their studios like armies. The coded language was obvious to those with inside knowledge of the history. The blacklisting was silent and absolute, while Redford chose not to reply publicly. Reportedly, next to Woods' name in his casting notes was a single scathing phrase, "Never ever." Despite Woods' obvious potential, Redford had little interest in casting him in risky, unpredictable situations. He once claimed that toxic relationships are different from tense ones. That line remained a mystery to him. Possibilities vanished. It was the last time the phone rang. Redford remained quiet, with the exception of the rare scathing remark made in private rooms, even if Woods' career became more about controversy than craft. He caused mayhem in areas that necessitated serenity. Managing that energy wasn't something that intrigued Redford, he added afterwards. Hoffman, Dustin. Although their portrayal of the President's Men cemented their status as a legendary film pairing, Redford's subtle annoyance at Hoffman's method was evident throughout. Hoffman was known to switch up blocking in the middle of a scene, improvise on the fly, and question scripts. The director's actor with pinpoint accuracy, Redford despised the uncertainty. Hoffman, in his opinion, shown a lack of respect for teamwork and attempted to exert control over the camera. They were never overtly antagonistic, but Redford gave the simple explanation of once was enough when asked why they never collaborated again. At first glance, it appeared magical. Two of the most famous actors of the 70s play the roles of real-life reporters who were involved in the investigation of the largest political scandal in U.S. history. In reality, though, two radically divergent artistic ideas were slowly but surely colliding behind the scenes. Arriving at set, Redford was well-prepared, careful, and in control. Redford had spent hours perfecting Hoffman's rhythm and vigor, but Hoffman preferred the air of spontaneity, sometimes changing his delivery mid-performance. The crew members who were there said that it was a subdued, nervous vibe, nothing too spectacular or explosive. While shooting, Hoffman would rehearse the scenario in one way. During takes, he would move around discreetly to change the camera's perspective, frequently walking into Redford's light. The first thing Redford did was try to brush it off as something that happens while storytelling. The interruptions, however, started to wear him down as work progressed. Hoffman allegedly shot 7 versions of a phone call scene in the newsroom, each with a unique tempo, tone, and set of unscripted words. Rumor has it that Redford was fuming at the end from having to deal with all those sudden changes. Everyone on set could feel the strain, but director Alan J. Pakula skillfully managed the line, never letting it boil over. According to one lighting technician, Bob was clearly nervous and clenching his jaw. Behind closed doors, Redford worried about the story falling apart every single day. A tale is what we're aiming to tell. Don't chase 1,000 little moments, he overheard Pakula telling him during a break. Despite the precarious situation, the director managed to keep both actors in a precarious orbit, all the while knowing that the end product would be unforgettable. The future director Redford, who would have his own critically acclaimed films, placed a premium on discipline, efficiency, and accuracy. Acting, in his view, was a team sport, and Hoffman frequently felt like an individual competing for victory. Years later, when proposals for retrospectives and reunion panels were made, Redford turned them all down, even though he never openly criticized Hoffman. There was an unspoken understanding between the two parties. There was no scandal or breakup. Forget it. No matter how brilliant a film is, not everyone will enjoy it. They were never overtly antagonistic, but Redford gave the simple explanation of once was enough when asked why they never collaborated again. Tom Cruise's lone film with him, Lions for Lambs, flopped at production. The film's director, Robert Redford, had a hard time getting Cruise to abandon his corporate mentality. As Redford would later explain, the focus was always on the brand rather than emotion or honesty in each and every note. The rumor mill claims that Cruise insisted on last-minute rewrites, tweaks to scenes, and other camera angles. Redford departed from the experience, describing it as one of the most frustrating projects of my career due to the film's failure. He severed all contact with Cruise. It seems like a perfect fit when the concept was initially proposed. Redford, the senior statesman of contemplative American cinema, and Cruise, the blockbuster juggernaut seeking to move towards serious stuff. However, there was an immediate disconnect in the chemistry. The bare-bones political drama was Redford's vision, simple, intelligent, and relevant. Cruise arrived and began discussing global messaging, clothes, lighting, and camera angles. Collaborating wasn't the goal. Collision was. Says an insider, the tension was there from the start. As one of the film's producers, Cruise insisted on having the last word over practically every aspect, from the poster art to the editing's timing. He was said to have brought a group of publicists and image consultants with him to production meetings, and he frequently brought up concepts like market positioning and viewer perception, in lieu of the typically used vocabulary between directors and actors. Redford was horrified because he had once spent 3 days practicing a quiet scene for regular folks. The gap became apparent even during practice. Reportedly, Cruise wanted his physical silhouette to convey discipline, so he asked stylists to be on standby throughout blocking sessions. I intended for the scene to convey vulnerability, Redford said afterwards, his jaw dropping. For him, symmetry was key. Neither of them could agree on the film's plot. In Redford's view, it served as a warning about the perils of corrupt institutions. Thought it was the story of a charismatic leader's journey to redemption. Things got much more tense on stage. In the middle of a scene, Cruise would frequently halt to ask for better lighting or offer an extra dramatic line that wasn't in the script. Redford, who was quite patient, made an effort to accommodate at first. However, his frustration became evident by the third week. During one take, a film crew member recounted an incident in which Redford discreetly remarked, "Are we selling a campaign ad or are we acting?" Cruise left an impression even during post-production. His sequences allegedly went through many cuts as he argued over the precise duration of a response shot. Prior to the studio's intervention and support for Cruise, Redford had given him rope. The last straw was that. Redford completed the picture he could, then he walked away from it and avoided the media. When it premiered, the film received mixed reviews and did poorly at the box office. Cruise continued. Silence fell on Redford. Both the artistic and philosophical breakdowns that resulted from the experience were significant. Two men, one attempting to make a statement and the other to sell something. Cruise was never spoken to again by him. Anne Hathaway. Despite its critical success, 3 Days of the Condor was chilly off-screen. Rumor has it that Redford and Dunaway were completely uncoordinated on set, and that tensions was palpable even between takes. Redford found himself caught in the middle of the tensions between Dunaway and the filmmaker on multiple occasions due to Dunaway's perfectionist streak and demanding personality. According to one crew member, her genuine concern made her easy to work with. What a pain she was. Since she had no faith in anyone, including him, she was a storm in heels, according to Redford. The partnership appeared good right from the start. With a reputation for cool professionalism and a string of successful films under his belt, Redford was a Hollywood powerhouse. Following her breakout performance in Chinatown, Dunaway was generally considered to be among the most captivating actors of her time. However, their approaches to the job were very different. Simplicity, economy, and restraint were important to Redford. Always prepared for battle, Dunaway was fiercely protective of her process and fearless in her challenges, whether to the director or her co-star. She had a habit of wanting to see the final product the day before filming, rewriting lines the night before, and even altering authorized lighting schemes. The production started to feel less like a creative zone and more like a daily negotiation to Redford, who had previously believed in trusting the team and maintaining momentum. A script supervisor claims that Redford once told the crew, "We're here to find truth, not micromanage every syllable into submission while on break." Their scenes together were intense, dramatic, and explosive, but it wasn't for show. The level of frustration was almost unbearable. Dunaway would have several takes of a line so she could fine-tune the intonation syllable by syllable. Redford, who was more comfortable going with his gut and pressing on, became progressively more agitated. Reportedly, he allegedly said, "We're not making a watch here," in response to her request for a fourth reset in a little scene. During a private meeting with director Sidney Pollack, tensions eventually sprang to the surface. Dunaway had cast doubt on her character's emotional reasoning in a pivotal episode. After sitting quietly at first, Redford became angry. "It's espionage, Faye, not Chekhov." The room went quiet. She walked out. The next day, she returned as if nothing had happened. But the mood never recovered. Despite the on-screen intimacy required by the script, there was nothing warm about their dynamic. Redford reportedly requested a body double be used for insert shots after Dunaway rapped. When asked about her in a press interview years later, he paused, smiled thinly, and said, "She's unforgettable." No collaborations followed, no reunion panels, no nostalgic interviews about the making of the film. She wasn't difficult because she cared. One crew member said, "She was difficult because she didn't trust anyone, not even him." Redford called her a storm in heels. Robert Duvall. Though they both starred in The Natural, Redford and Duvall were like oil and water. Duvall's improvisational, instinct-first approach clashed with Redford's structured precision. Redford reportedly asked Duvall to stick to the script during a pivotal scene, and Duvall flatly refused. What followed was a behind-the-scenes shouting match that crew members still talk about. Duvall wanted to play jazz, Redford said later. "I wanted to play composition. It wasn't music, it was noise. From day one on set, their differences were obvious. Redford approached the film like a symphony. No, just rehearsed, timed, emotionally calibrated. He had spent weeks preparing for the role of Roy Hobbs, fine-tuning every detail down to body language and breath. Duvall, meanwhile, showed up with no notes, no rehearsal plans, and a firm belief that real acting came from the gut, not the page. At first, Redford admired the rawness. Duvall's portrayal of cynical sports writer Max Mercy was electric, unpredictable, and deeply lived in. But as the shoot wore on, that same unpredictability became a liability. Duvall would rewrite lines in the makeup chair, shift the rhythm of a scene without warning, or deliver a completely different emotional tone from take to take. Redford, known for his patience, began to lose it. Their differences weren't just stylistic, they were personal. Redford was quiet, measured, deliberate. Duvall was explosive, volatile, almost gleefully chaotic. On the set of The Natural, that contrast created an undercurrent of friction that never quite boiled over, but never cooled either. They were both brilliant, said one crew member, but they weren't making the same movie. The breaking point came during a crucial confrontation scene. Redford wanted to hit a specific emotional beat, one that tied directly into a larger arc he and director Barry Levinson had carefully constructed. Cutie. Duvall, uninterested in any arc that wasn't his own, kept undercutting the tension with sarcastic ad-libs. Redford stopped the take, turned to Duvall and said, "It's not your movie." Duvall fired back, "It's not anyone's until it's real." They argued for 15 minutes while the cameras rolled in silence. Crew members backed away. One sound technician later said, "Was like watching a campfire turn into a forest fire." Levinson eventually stepped in to mediate, and the scene was completed, barely. After the shoot, Redford was asked about working with Duvall. His response was clipped. "He's brilliant, but I don't need to go through that again." Duvall never responded publicly, but the two were never in the same room again, even during press tours. There's a reason no second collaboration ever materialized. Not because of lack of opportunity, but because neither man had forgotten the flame out. Duvall wanted to play jazz. Redford said later, I wanted to play composition. It wasn't music, it was noise. Paul Newman, it's the name no one expected. The man most associated with Redford, the partner in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid in The Sting, the other half of the myth. But, according to Redford, the relationship wasn't what it seemed. He was charming, Redford said, but he always kept a distance. And sometimes he played dumb to get away with more than he should have. There was no dramatic feud, just the slow erosion of trust. When Newman began taking more producer control on The Sting, Redford felt the shift. He stopped being my co-star and started being my competition, he once confided. The friendship never fully broke, but it faded into polite distance. From the outside, they were lightning in a bottle, the perfect contrast. Newman was all cool blue charisma and effortless magnetism. Redford, the quiet storm, thoughtful and composed, uncomposed. Together, they changed what a movie star could be. Funny, self-aware, dangerously charming. But beneath the surface, Redford always sensed something guarded in Newman, a wall he could never quite scale. Their dynamic on Butch Cassidy was warm, easy, built on laughs and long days in the desert. But by the time they reunited for The Sting, something had shifted. Newman had more clout. He arrived to meetings flanked by studio execs, often with notes on scripts, casting, even camera placement. Redford, still more interested in the art than the politics, felt himself pushed to the sidelines. It stopped being two guys making a movie, one crew member later said. It became a chess match between stars. Redford kept his frustration mostly private, but those close to him saw the toll. Admired Newman deeply, but he also resented the way the public treated Newman as the soul of their partnership. In interviews, journalists would direct questions to Newman first. Headlines would lean on Newman's name. Paul was the face, Redford once said, and I was the footnote. The years that followed brought cordial interactions, tributes, the occasional shared appearance, but they never made another film together. Offers came, scripts were floated, but nothing ever landed. When asked why, Redford would always say timing wasn't right, but those who knew the truth understood. Timing wasn't the problem, trust was. There was no rift, no betrayal, just two icons quietly drifting apart, one silent mile at a time. He was charming, Redford said, but he always kept a distance. And sometimes he played dumb to get away with more than he should have. There was no dramatic feud, just the slow erosion of trust. When Newman began taking more producer control on The Sting, Redford felt the shift. He stopped being my co-star and started being my competition, he once confided. The friendship never fully broke, but it faded into polite distance. Some of these names will hurt, others will feel inevitable, but together they paint a picture few have seen before. Of a man who, for all his poise and restraint, carried the scars of collaboration, just like anyone else. Because for all the sunshine on screen, Redford's Hollywood had shadows too.